No food. Mom collapsed, came the urgent message from my daughter, Lily. Since my divorce a year ago, my 7-year-old Lily had been living with my ex-wife, Susan. Today, Lily called to tell me that Susan had become dangerously thin and had been hospitalized. Lily, what's happening? I send $2,000 every month. Why? Daddy, please help Mom. The desperation in my daughter's voice spurred me into action. I left work early and rushed to the hospital where Susan had been admitted, praying for their safety as I hurried into a taxi. Upon arriving, I found my daughter in tears beside my mother-in-law. Susan lay in bed with her eyes closed, appearing to be asleep. How is Susan, Mother? I asked anxiously. It's a mess. Hospitalized for malnutrition. Pills are piling up. Malnutrition. She said she was on a diet and hardly ate. I told her many times to eat more. I couldn't believe she had neglected her health to this extent. Daddy, will Mom be okay? Lily's voice trembled with worry. Yes, sweetheart, she'll be fine. She just needs to rest in the hospital, and soon everything will be back to normal. Really? Lily clung to me, her tears quieting as she took comfort in my reassurance. A faint smile appeared on her face, but as I held her, I noticed something unsettling. Has Lily lost weight too? I wondered. That's normal for kids during growth spurts, my mother-in-law said, trying to ease my concern. Is that so? I deeply regretted how ignorant I had been of the well-being of Susan and my daughter. Reflecting on our past, I realized I was the cause of our divorce. Back then, as a salesman in a major corporation, I was so busy that I could hardly come home. I left everything about the house and our daughter to Susan, neglecting my responsibilities as a husband and father. This neglect made Susan deeply upset, leading her to ask for a divorce. After the divorce, Susan and Lily moved back to her parents' home, where her father and stepmother lived. Her parents, who had married later in life, feared being alone in old age, so they welcomed Susan and Lily warmly despite Susan's worries about being a burden. Out of my own will, I sent them $2,000 every month, hoping they would live comfortably. Feeling responsible for our divorce, I decided to do everything I could to support them. Initially, our relationship after the divorce was not bad. We often contacted each other, and I kept up with news about my daughter, who had just started grade school. However, in the past 6 months, I had been so busy that I lost touch with my ex-wife. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to Susan during this period. As I looked at Susan lying on the bed, emaciated, I was deep in thought, filled with regret and concern for her well-being. Isn't this a bit extreme for a diet? I wonder why she felt the need to lose so much weight. Well, who knows? Maybe she found someone she likes. She's still young, after all. James, you can go home. I'll take care of Susan. All right, I'll head home for today. Mother, it must be hard staying with her. How about Lily? She can come to my place. Ha! Really? I want to go, Lily said, happily squeezing my hand. My mother-in-law immediately responded, I'll take care of Lily here. You're busy with work, James, and she needs to go to school. But Lily says she wants to go. I can drop her off and pick her up from school. You're busy with work, and it's difficult for you to take care of her. Plus, you don't even have custody over her. Her reasoning left me at a loss for words. I see. In that case, when she wakes up, could you ask Susan if she'll let me take care of Lily while she's hospitalized? Regardless of what you say, she's still my daughter. Apologizing to my disappointed daughter, I bowed to my mother-in-law and left the room. Looking back, I regretted not insisting on taking Lily home with me right then. Several days passed since Susan was hospitalized. One evening, after work, I returned home to an unexpected sight. My daughter was there. Lily, did you come here all by yourself? Daddy, she said, looking up at me anxiously. Lily was dressed in the same worn-out clothes she had on at the hospital. A faded t-shirt, scuffed shoes, and her hair, clearly self-tied, was in disarray. It was the same discomfort I felt back in the hospital room. At that moment, consumed by concern for Susan. I hadn't paid much attention, but now, the realization hit me like a wave of failure as a father. Inviting Lily into the house, I offered her a cup of hot milk. Doesn't your mom buy you new clothes or shoes? No, it's not like that. Lily shook her head, seeming to struggle with her words as she looked down. I've been working hard, sending money so you and Mom could live comfortably. Has it not been enough? Dad, that's not it. Lily's voice trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. I placed a comforting hand on her back, silently urging her to speak. After a moment, she seemed to gather herself, taking a deep breath. Rima does mean things to me and Mom. She barely lets us eat. No way. Is that really true about Grandma? It's true. I manage because I get lunch at school, but Mom's always hungry. That's why she collapsed. And Grandma goes out every night, and when she comes back in the morning, she always badmouths me and Mom. Since we moved in with Grandma, Mom has been treated like a servant every day. Lily's words, punctuated by tears and frustration, hit me like a ton of bricks. Could Susan's malnutrition be caused by her own mother? How could this happen? If I had stayed in contact, maybe I could have prevented this. Feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness, I bit my lip only to feel a small, warm hand gently touch mine. Dad, don't cry. My heart clenched as Lily bravely smiled at me, holding back her own tears. With her encouragement, I resolved to help my ex-wife and daughter. About a week later, I received a call from the hospital about Susan's scheduled discharge. Normally, the in-laws would have been the first to be informed, but I had made arrangements with the hospital to prevent that. I had become suspicious of my mother-in-law, noticing how she always obstructed my visits with Susan and limited our communication. Her incessant calls, even when Lily was staying with me, coupled with Lily's troubling stories, convinced me that something was amiss. So, I decided to take Susan directly to my house on the day of her discharge without informing my mother-in-law. When Lily and I arrived at the hospital, there was Susan, thinner, yet with a much healthier complexion than when she was admitted. "Thank you for coming to get me. I'm sorry for the trouble." Hearing Susan's voice properly after so long quickened my heartbeat. I was immensely relieved she was alive. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, Lily rushed to hug her mother. "Mom, I'm so glad you're okay now." "Lily, I'm sorry for worrying you." Their emotional reunion brought a lump to my throat, but I knew we couldn't linger for my mother-in-law to arrive. Hastily, I ushered them into the car and drove home. "It feels nostalgic," Susan said, relieved, as we arrived at the house we once shared. Waiting for the right moment when she seemed calm, I broached the subject. "Actually, Lily told me something." As I asked Susan about the truth of Lily's words, her eyes widened and she awkwardly averted her gaze. What Lily said was true. After our divorce and my return home, my mother began treating me like a maid. Even when I started earning from work, she took all the money. There were even times she wouldn't let me eat because she claimed I didn't earn enough. "Why didn't you talk to me about it?" "How could you say that?" "I couldn't ask for help because I was the one who initiated the divorce. We hadn't been in touch recently, so I assumed you found a new partner. I didn't want to interfere with that." "A new partner? No way. Besides, didn't I transfer $2,000 to you every month? How did you fall ill?" "If you're lying, I haven't received anything." "I'm sure the money was transferred just fine. It should be recorded in your bank book." "My mother took both my bank book and debit card. She told me that you stopped sending money a long time ago, that you found someone new, and had abandoned me." I was stunned. If only I had kept in touch more diligently, this wouldn't have happened, but it's too late to regret it now. "She also took my credit cards and used them without my permission." "But couldn't you have run away?" "If I did that, they would turn on my father, who is left at home. I can't leave my father alone." Susan choked up as she said this. My mother-in-law was a big spender, and when Susan and I were still married, she would often come to us asking for money. Despite this, she was generally pleasant and kind, so I believed Susan and Lily would get along with her. However, the moment Susan moved back home after the divorce, my mother-in-law seemed to transform into a completely different person. She neglected her household duties, spending her days out and taking out her frustrations on Susan and Lily when she ran out of money. My father-in-law, a quiet man, couldn't stand up to my mother-in-law, so he turned a blind eye to her behavior. He offered no help, leaving Susan to endure it alone. But I let Lily suffer. I'm a terrible mother, aren't I? That's not true. The one at fault is entirely my mother-in-law. I see, thank you. With that, tears quietly streamed down her cheeks. A few days later, I waited for the day my mother-in-law would be out and headed to my in-law's house. When I arrived, my father-in-law, Apollo, greeted me with a deep bow. "I'm truly sorry. I've done a terrible thing to Susan and Lily." "Sir, I've heard about what my mother-in-law has been doing to Susan and Lily. I came here to help them." Upon hearing my straightforward statement, my father-in-law gradually began to speak. "I noticed what she's been doing, but I turned a blind eye. I grew afraid to speak up as I saw her change day by day. But I can't bear to see my daughter and granddaughter hurt any longer. His voice trembled with regret. Like me, he wished to protect them both. Sir, could you lend me a hand? I requested his assistance in monitoring my mother-in-law's activities, where she went, how she spent the $2,000 I transferred, and how Susan's credit card was used. Subsequently, I also initiated my own investigation into my mother-in-law's actions. Where have you been? The hospital bills were expensive. You really are one hell of a burden. I overheard my mother-in-law's harsh words to Susan during a visit to their home. On another occasion, I accompanied Susan to her parents' house. As soon as Susan entered, I could hear a loud voice berating her. Ignoring my surprise, my father-in-law turned to Susan and asked, "Are you all right?" Susan trembled in fear from the berating. Rubbing her back, I turned my gaze towards my mother-in-law, who froze for a moment before hastily greeting me. "Oh, welcome. What brings you here so unexpectedly?" "I just dropped off little Lily at school and thought I could come over to discuss some matters regarding Susan and Lily without having Lily present. Hope I'm not intruding." "Oh, a discussion about what, I wonder? As you can see, we're getting along quite nicely." Saying that, my mother-in-law tapped Susan's shoulder, to which Susan clearly showed her discomfort. Already seated on the living room sofa was my father-in-law. I pulled Susan close, sitting down nearby. "I've been transferring money to Susan's account to help out even a little bit after our divorce. Is it true you are using up all the money?" "What? What money? I know nothing about it. Susan's probably trying to cover up her frivolous spending by blaming me. I wonder where the $2,000 every month is going. What a terrible daughter." As expected, my mother-in-law feigned ignorance, attempting to shift the blame onto my ex-wife. She likely thought she could evade responsibility, but I exchanged a glance with my father-in-law, who quietly nodded. The moment for retribution had arrived. "That's odd. You mentioned that $2,000 every month, but you told Susan that I stopped sending money and had abandoned her and our daughter, right?" My mother-in-law started trembling as I uttered those words. "That's what I heard from Susan. I didn't have control of my bank books or cards. You took them all. I couldn't possibly know about it. Besides, you've been using my credit card too, haven't you?" "I've received the receipts." "What exactly have you been using Susan's credit card and the $2,000 you receive every month for, mother-in-law?" To her question, my mother-in-law shook her head, insisting she didn't know. Of course, we expected her to play dumb. In the midst of this, my father-in-law brought something out from the back of the room. "Stop lying anymore." "What do you mean? Do you suspect me as well?" To my enraged mother-in-law, my father-in-law pulled out a few photos. "So that's where you've been going every night. You seem to have a favorite host at the nightclub. It appears you've been having a grand time using James's money and Susan's credit card. How did you?" My father-in-law and I looked into everything. Although we only had to follow you around since you were so careless, we figured out everything without much deep investigation. "What's wrong with using my daughter's money? I should be allowed that much. Furthermore, it seems that wasn't enough money for you. You've been tricking money out of widowed men like my father, almost akin to marriage fraud, haven't you?" "Shut up. It's the victim's fault for being fooled." As we presented the evidence, my mother-in-law brazenly shrugged it off. "I thought this man had money when I married him, but it turns out he didn't have much. Luckily, my daughter Susan has been a great contributor. Haha, men at the local senior centers are so easy. All it takes is a soft voice to have them smitten." Hearing this, my father-in-law's jaw dropped to the ground. Susan and I were at a loss for words. "We're calling the police." "No, anything but that." At the mention of the police, my mother-in-law turned pale, but I went ahead and called them. "Why would you call the police? This isn't looking good for me." "So you're aware that what you've done is wrong." "Just don't call the cops. I apologize for everything. Forgive me." "Judging from your attitude, it seems like you've done this before. Don't worry, we'll have the police conduct a thorough investigation." My mother-in-law, pale face and shaking, was taken away by the police officers who arrived shortly after. Apparently, my mother-in-law was arrested on charges of marriage fraud, and it seems like several people were demanding repayment for their money. Naturally, my father-in-law divorced her. Furthermore, he sued her for the emotional distress inflicted on her family from her harassment. Susan also claimed $50,000 in damages for the misuse of her credit card. Of course, I'm also demanding the return of all the money I transferred. My mother-in-law, now behind bars, doesn't seem to have an easy life waiting for her when she's out. As for me, afterward, Susan, please marry me again. This time, I'll protect you and our daughter. I won't make you cry anymore. We had once stumbled through a misguided marriage, but this incident made me realize the true value of my ex-wife. Hearing my words, Susan cried, thanked me, and held my hand tightly. Now our family is embarking on a fresh start. This time, I will safeguard this happiness with all my heart.